No Skype for now. Hello, and welcome to the IntensiveCareHotline.com podcast. IntensiveCareHotline.com helps families of critically ill patients in intensive care to instantly improve their lives by making informed decisions, get peace of mind, control, power, and influence. Thank you for listening to another episode of the IntensiveCareHotline.com podcast. And today I've got a very special guest. I've got Penny with me, and Penny is from the UK. Hi, Penny. How are you?
Hi, Patrick. I'm fine. I'm looking out the window over Morecambe Bay, and it's a beautiful blue sky, and it is just 10:15 in the morning.
That's excellent. What's the weather like in?
Beautiful today, but it's been an awful lot of rain.
Right.
That's typical. Right. But I say to people, Patrick, if it wasn't rain is liquid sunshine. There'd be no lakes, and the Lake District is so famous, Bigfoot Potter and so on, and swallows and Amazons, and it really is the most lovely area to be in. It's very gentle.
Yeah. I've been to the Lake District in England. It's beautiful. It's spectacular.
So I want to go to Australia as well. It's on the list. It's on the list.
Yep. And there's not even 50% of the rain that you're getting in the Lake District, but that would be for a whole other conversation. I want to really thank you, Penny, for coming on to this interview. You have a very interesting story to share. You lost your husband last year in intensive care after, a long illness. But I don't want to give too much away for our listeners. I want you to tell your story because I think it's quite, a remarkable story. I also think it's a story where our listeners can learn a lot. They can learn a lot from what you've been through and how you've dealt with, or what you've come across in terms of the medical profession. Your research, and I'll let you do the talking, Penny. I'll get out of your way.
Okay, well, let's put in, Patrick, if you think I haven't explained anything or you want a little bit more detail, because Terry, my husband of over 31 years, has been my greatest teacher. Along with my daughter's relative turn life in 1993 due to mercury, there's another story there. So that's I've been as a school teacher for 27 years that I was before I had to retire early because Terry was so ill. I've always been interested in basically looking at the big picture, and that's not just because I taught art, maybe, but not what's going on, but why, and what can we do about it? How can we become self-empowered? And I think that has been the biggest awakening for me, and also I'm sure for a lot of other poor souls who have gone through the mill. And I feel that as many people alive today, this lifetime it's not been easy. But from the difficult times, as I said to you before, Patrick, has evolved my greatest learning. And then I love sharing things, so it's so good to be able to just sort of tell the story as briefly as I can, because it's involved. It was on a continuum, because in 1990 my husband had his first knee operation, and he hallucinated on painkillers, and that surprised all the. He didn't even get in the medical records, because I'm a bit of I like to find things out, and I like to know what's happening, and I couldn't believe it. It was for me, it was important that it didn't get in the records, and one of the reasons for it is his immune system was very repressed, that we didn't know about literally until 2013. So we go 1990, a long time, because of some toxic dentistry that he had probably 20 years before that impacted his immune system. And I think I spoke to you about it because it's something that vets are taught to deal with animals that are brought in that are very ill. They would never diagnose without checking the animal's teeth. This is true. I don't know how it works. It plays out in other countries, but it's definitely in the UK. But doctors are not taught that there's any link with teeth. And apart from recently, I'm not sure if it's happened where you are, Patrick, but there's been in the news how some heart problems are linked to infected teeth. And
absolutely.
So
that's nothing new. That's nothing new in intensive care. There's lots
right.
of, well, when I say lots, there's a number of people coming into intensive care with myocarditis, for example, which is an infection of the heart, and that's caused by, for example, by a dental infection. I've seen that.
How about that? So I think what the Eastern, the Western doctors aren't taught is that every tooth is linked to an energy pathway in the body. We have bundles of energy, and the whole of the allopathic medical system is very thorough. Doctors are trained incredibly intensely, as you know, but they look down a long tunnel and they don't see that there's anything else apart from the physical body, but there is. And these energy meridians are, and there's charts. If you go to holistic dentists, and we've got a fair few in the UK now, one excellent one in Huddersfield called Dr. John Roberts, who removed and replaced all my mercury. Mercury, we've been poisoned since 1834, and that's affected children as it goes down the generations. The more you learn, the more there is to learn. And also, we found out that Terry had actually 5 jawbone infections from teeth that have either been extracted badly, wisdom teeth, or 1 root-filled teeth. Now, everybody needs to order this lovely book from the Western Price Foundation in America. Okay, it costs a bit, but it's called The Root Canal Cover-Up by Dr. George Meinig, M-E-I-N-I-G. And for 25 years, Western Price conducted a thorough investigation with a team of 60 scientists into the way root-filled teeth can actually cause chronic illness and disease, chronic, like cancers and arthritis. Now that, I've seen the actual 1,100-page bound volume of this, because my dentist in Huddersfield, John Roberts, has one. There's not many around. I saw it. And it was given to the FDA in 1925, I think it was 1900. Sorry, my dates, I'm not very good at maths. It's all been covered up since 1925, the whole lot. So that is the biggest hole in my husband's jawbone, denoting the infection, was under the root-filled tooth. I saw the operation to clean them out. I was there. In fact, I took photographs. So, as I said before the NHS meeting after Terry had passed away last year, I deal in facts, not hearsay, not supposition, not presumptions, but just backed up solid, well-researched facts and observations, and which I have done. Obviously, I trust my feelings as well, and I've had a really strong feeling that all has not been well with the allopathic medical industry. A lot of it's very good. We know that. It's magic. Yeah. I've had 2 cataract operations. I'm 72 now, and I feel about 40.
That's great.
To say. And I broke my radius. I was moving too fast and knocked into something, and when I went to have it x-rayed and so on, and I had a little sling on, I chatted to, I love talking to people, you probably guessed, can't you, the rate I rattle on, and I was chatting to the doctor there, who put the, he'd patch me up basically, and he looked at me and he said, I don't suppose you'd take painkillers, would you? I said, no. I said, the pain lets me know what I have to do with my arm. It's a rotating bone. The pain is there for a reason. But anyway, so I've had these, obviously observing my husband go through all the operations that have gone wrong, or misdiagnosing, or refusing to see things in front of the faces of the medics. And I'm thinking, what is going on? And I feel a lot of it's to do with the training. Obviously there's a lot of questions I haven't had time even to look at, because I've been concentrating, as you probably can understand, on basically what's happened to Terry and other people, but mainly Terry, because he was such a gentle, very, very lovely man. He was a lace maker as a hobby. That's what he loved doing. He loved nature, animals, children, not a negative bone in his body, apart from the fact he didn't love himself. But that, I think, we'll save for another interview, Patrick, because it's a big subject, this self-love. And he trusted his doctor. That's what I'm saying. He looked outside himself all the while, instead of trusting himself and his own research, if you like. He could use the internet. He's got his own laptop.
Yeah.
I've got the big PC, got a laptop. And so what happened basically to cause the big deterioration? Because he was driving, he was useful, he couldn't work, not a job, but because after his mental breakdown, when he's drugged up, but then he stopped taking his drugs and recovered. So I was putting all this on the back burner.
And when you're saying he was drugged up, what do you mean by that?
Oh, huge amount of psychiatric drugs. But that was in 1998. I didn't learn much till 2001 when I first got my computer and I had my mercury taken out my teeth, and because it's neurotoxic, and I inherited a lot from my grandparent, my grandmother, my mother, and I had my own amalgam filling. So it's like a massive, like almost like when I detoxed after having the safe, material put in the teeth of mine. I tended to wake up as well as all my symptoms that I had, such as allergies and so on. They disappeared. In fact, symptoms I had that I didn't know were connected with mercury poisoning disappeared. So I was able to really, to see what was happening to him. I could see these things, but he believed his doctor. And at the end of the day, Patrick, and you'll agree, and I'm sure all the listeners will, within the best will in the world, no matter how much you think and how much you love somebody, you can't control them.
No, of course not.
They have to make their own decision. And they're here very often on their own pathway. And that was very difficult for me to step back. In fact, I didn't until he went in the care home, because it was the head injury that he had in 2010. We had a reasonable life up to there. And he was still, after the knee operations that didn't go well, and then had on scar tissue with the gallstones, and which again was linked to the root to the toxic dentistry on that meridian line, which we didn't know about till 2013. So the learning went on and on. But then the head injury, which she was knocked unconscious for 2 hours in the home, unwitnessed. He was on the phone to his stepmother. I was out for the evening. Unusual for me to be out late because I'm an early morning person, but I was that evening. And he was on the phone to his stepmother. He heard a noise in the house. He had no animals that time. And just as he was getting up to say, still on the phone to his stepmother, who was age 90 at that time, I better go and go. And he doesn't remember anything more until 2 hours later, the phone was back on the hook, and he was in a pile of blood downstairs, facing forward. Well, the upshot of that was that he was patched up well in hospital, but sent home, and they had a consultant that basically said, I think you had a seizure and fell down the stairs. I mean, where are they coming from?
Right.
Because of the records, which can't be altered, we can put letters in, can't we? We can't. The police didn't investigate when we actually made, because of those records.
And what was that head injury? What was it like? What was the diagnosis?
A 3.5-inch gash on the back of his head, and as I came into the hospital at 2:30 in the morning, because it's quite a way away, the same one actually where he died last year, Sonis General. I'll say what it is. Sonis General Hospital. Have a look online. You see the infant deaths and the mortalities that have been in the news. The police didn't investigate, but when we insisted, they came out and looked round and said, oh, well, yeah, somebody could have got in. We still don't know. But I saw the sleuth report, and after the investigation by who I thought was a really nice detective constable, the sleuth report was demonising us. And that is, as I've said to my MP, Tim Farron, who's the leader of the Lib Dems here, my MP, there's an inversion going on. I nearly said satanic. Sorry, everybody, if you're not, that has been going on. I said inversion because the whistleblowers, the good-hearted people, are very often targeted, arrested, gagged, but the criminals are rewarded. Sir Jimmy Savile, the Lord General, and so on. And this is what happened with the police report. I thought, wow. So my senses were even more sharpened. You see how that sort of fits into the story. And then Terry, because he had the pain from the scar tissue and so on, with the operation that had gone wrong with his gallstones and so on, he took cocodamol, and his doctor prescribed for 15 months. Terry didn't know it was addictive. I didn't know. I didn't know it's related to heroin. I hadn't done that research. I thought, well, he's only taking one. I knew multi-medications then were very harmful. I knew they were never tested more than one at a time then, going back to 2010. But I thought, as he wasn't taking anything else, he'd be okay, but he wasn't. And it led to very, very slow, perhaps after a few months' time, brain damage, loss of skills. Driving wasn't, and nobody knew why. And we went to the GP, and nothing happened, and I was just, time went on, and suddenly he had the stroke. He said that's because of toxicity in the brain.
Right, and prior to the stroke, with the head injury, what happened with the head injury? What did the CT scan of the brain show? Do you remember? Before he had the stroke?
It didn't show up anything apart from what had happened when he had his breakdown, which was minor. It's like a TIA, attack. But all he did was, I saw him when he had his breakdown, I watched it happen. All he wanted was peace, quiet, and no pain. And all he got from the psychiatric hospital, masses and masses and masses of psychiatric drugs, including Prozac, on top of his painkillers, on top of his anti-inflammatory he was taking. Yeah. And that caused the intracranial hypertension, which nearly finished him off in 2000. Right. So that was another part of the picture.
And just for our listeners to explain, TIA means trans-ischemic attack, and it's a minor stroke where people usually recover really quickly. So I just wanted to throw that in for our listeners.
Yeah, sorry. Go on.
Just that this is what probably happened to your husband, but then later he had a proper stroke. Is that what happened next?
Because of the cocodamol that was being given to him for 15 months after the. Now, I'll just say to you, listeners, that my research then kicked off because I was so interested on what would cause a seizure, you see. After being diagnosed with having a seizure by this visiting consultant that never even talked to him, there were no tests, nothing. He just came to his bedside and announced that the good news was he could go home today. I was actually there. I was just coming in the hospital to visit. And the bad news was that he thought, in his opinion, Terry had a stroke and fell downstairs. And Terry said, well, have you got CCTV? And told you. And he said, you'll have to contact the DVLA who might stop you drive. Well, something words to that effect. And Terry, he had a mobility car then because he wasn't brilliantly mobile. But he loved driving. It was his lifeline. That upset him. So I went to see this consultant who was twitching and twitching. His face was, I'm not kidding you, and he was a neurologist. Right. I shouldn't laugh, but I'm going back. And I said to him, why do you think Terry, my husband, had a seizure? And he reeled off a few of the symptoms. I said, they're symptoms of concussion. I was right. He had no seizure markers. He'd never had one before. But obviously what happened as the time went on with the trauma to the brain, if you're knocked unconscious, I cleared the blood up. Patrick, I have never seen anything like it. I have never. And when I got into hospital, the guy, the medic, stapling him, I had staples. Said, this is a very strange wound. It looks more like a splat than a cut. But you see, nothing was ever found. We still don't know, or I still don't know now what happened to him, but I suspect someone came in. We weren't secure, but anyway, the police, nothing came of it. And so after the stroke, Terry's, that's okay, I was just going to say, sorry, let's go back. My research found out that there's no test in the UK for damage to the blood-brain barrier or toxicity in the brain. And the scanner that can be used to detect that is called a SPECT scanner, SPECT, nuclear medicine. They have scanners, two hospitals, the one that Terry went to, Furnace General, and also Lancaster Royal Infirmary have SPECT scanners. I phoned up I was walking into the X-ray department in Furnace General. I was there, and I talked to the radiologist, and they said, no, we don't. We can only use the scanners for scanning bones. So although they've got the equipment, they don't do it. But they do this in America. I'm not sure, probably Czech Republic, probably Germany, your country.
Yeah, they do.
So toxicity in the brain. Now, when Terry was in psychiatric hospital, I was not a favour, nor was Terry, of the ECT, electric convulsive therapy. Mm-hmm. Because
why did they do that? Why did they do that?
They didn't do it. They threatened him, and he didn't want it. But when I saw what happened to Terry with this toxicity building up in his brain, and then he had the stroke, and then after that, with the drugs he was given, he did actually have seizures. Right. After he'd had, now I'm watching this and I'm noting, after the seizure, his mind, his brain was working better. It's almost as though it shook out the toxins. Do you know what I'm saying? I don't know if you've come across anything. It's probably not.
I haven't. I can tell you my experience with seizures. Usually, it does go the other way. That people with seizures, because they take more medication. If anything, their neurology usually deteriorates. But I'm very curious to hear what your observation was.
Yeah, I saw an improvement, and that changed my opinion of ECT, because actually that psychiatric patients, when they've had that mild convulsive, so not strong like you see in the past, some of those footage of years ago when they were, oh my God, it was absolutely horrendous, but a mild little, they feel a lot better afterwards, and they've much improved. But anyway, going back to the
and do you remember when he had seizures? Do you remember whether they put him on any anticonvulsant medication?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, they did. Now, quite a bit has happened actually from when he had the stroke, and he literally, Patrick, he gave up. He didn't want to get better, and that's when the suicidal feelings started coming in. And I was beside myself, because I'm quite a feisty character. I've been a rebel since 4 years old. I didn't like the society I was born into, nor did my mother. I was born in 12/12/44, and girls and women were treated really quite, not very well. And the worst thing a boy could say in his group of pals was, "you go," and then didn't understand it. So I've been quite a rebel. But and so I've wanted to find out, exactly what's going on, and then learn from it. And I really have, I've been on the ball with this quite a lot. And the seizures actually didn't come in until Terry's digestive system was terribly disrupted because of this low self-love. The heart, energy fields in the heart, is desperate to have this self-love. And look at children, animals are teaching us. And also the brain. Now you've got a brain in your head, the computer brain, you've got a brain in your heart and in your gut. Now, I didn't know that until I saw what was happening with Terry as he gave up. He wouldn't do his exercises, and I was struggling, because honestly, Patrick, I do thoroughly admire what you do and all the carers. I struggle to be a carer, and I will admit that. I did my best, but by gosh, I went through some awful, difficult times. It was so hard. But it's all past now, and have I learned? Because I could see this gut-brain connection, what was happening with him, and the worst, the more he went down and down and down, the worse this diarrhea, and in the end, it started. He had the seizure, and his mobility went, and he had to go in the care home. He was suicidal. He was a wreck. And that's when I stepped back from the medication, because he was given in the care home, and he fought not to have the medication before he went in, even though his doctor was insistent, there's drugs for the stroke, but I knew that they were crucifying him. This is before the dental work, so his immune system was suppressed before the chemicals came in. But anyway, having said that, he still was very sensitive, and that brings that little point in with the medics describing one size fits all, which the vets don't do. They give medicine according to weight to the animal. And he was very sensitive, and he was, suicidal in the care home. But then that's when he was on, I think, just a small antidepressant, only small, not very, which helped him. He was on a small dose of, I think it was the Keppra, but very low.
Keppra for seizures. But I have to say, you mentioned, drugs being given according to weight. I have to say that does happen most of the time in ICU or in hospital. But I'm not saying it happens in every single case. But most of the time, it doesn't happen all the time. But, Keppra, for example, I have seen certainly being titrated, towards, if somebody's 50 kilos or 90 kilos,
really,
there is usually a consideration of.
Oh right, well,
but there's always the exception. There's always the exception to the rule, of course.
For some reason, I didn't. When I was in intensive care the year before last, I didn't ask actually. God, I was so overawed by everything that was happening and all the monitors and so on. But I could just say something about this seizure threshold. When he was misdiagnosed as having a seizure in 2010, which he didn't, then I did the research of what would cause that, what would lower someone's seizure threshold. At the same time I was looking at this, there was an article in the mainstream media. A woman had gone into a supermarket. Suddenly, she found herself on the floor. She pulled over a great big rack of food or something all over herself, and she'd had a seizure. And when she was tested, she'd no sea salt in the body. She hadn't got enough salt. Now, isn't that interesting? And I took that to heart because in the care home, they think it's good not to have salt in the body. And this brings on to the sodium chloride effect as well, which has adverse effects as well. It's a denatured salt. And I've done a fair amount of research because I thought that was fascinating. And I thought then, what else does sea salt do? So I've got my books. I've just had another one delivered from Amazon called The History of Salt, Sea Salt, the Salt Roots. It's imperative for health. So I used to take my pink Himalayan salt in for when Terry was having a meal and put some on, and everybody looked at me as, just sort of a bit weird, which I know I am, but I hope it's in, the right way. But I wasn't there for all his meals, that's the thing, and they didn't use salt in the cooking. And he's brightened up, so we'll go back to now. He'd had the dental stuff, he was cleaned out, he was a lot better. He could actually cope with the low doses of the medications he was given. I used to take him vitamin D3, liquid sunshine as well, but they wouldn't give it to him. I was only allowed to give any natural supplements to him in his room. And that's interesting, isn't it? I don't know if that applies in other care homes in other countries.
I'm not the expert on care homes. I wouldn't know what happens in care homes, really.
Yeah. So they will have the doctor in, they will have the multi-medications, which have never been tested, as we know, not together. And we know the polypharmacy is it's very dodgy. It needs looking at carefully. And so anyway, brightened up, and I was pleased and quite upset then when he had a grand mal seizure a year in 2015, and he was in Furness General. But honestly, he was treated well, and this is where it gave me a false sense of security to what happened to him last year when he died. I could see, because this is where it sort of starts to lay down the foundation of, first of all, me stepping back and saying, right, if Terry wants to take the drugs, fine, because at that time when he went in the care home, he was suicidal. He coped well with them, and they did seem to help him up the doses he was at, and then he ended up in intensive care. I went in, the grandma said, I was just gobsmacked with how well he was treated at that time. And the only thing is that the antibiotic, which made his heart race.
And that's a good point now that you mentioned, we're now at the point where, he's going into intensive care. That's leaving our listeners with a bit of a cliffhanger, because we're now coming to the end of episode 1.
Gone quickly.
We're coming to the end of episode 1 of this interview, and next time when we do episode 2 of this interview, we'll talk all about what's happened in intensive care, what you've come across, how staff treated you and your husband. And that's what we do. Yes. And that's what we do in our second episode. So that was really just, the pre-story, how your husband got to this point to get into intensive care. So thank you very much for sharing that.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been great to have you on. It's really a holistic interview because we want to look at the bigger picture, which is something that's often missing with my clients. Not with all of them, but most of them are not looking at the bigger picture.
We've not been taught, have we?
No, we haven't been taught. We've just been looked at a diagnosis, at the symptoms, without looking, who is this person? What's their history?
And why are these symptoms occurring? Because the body is so super intelligent. Every cell in the body communicates with each other. It's amazing, self-healing, self-generating.
Exactly.
And a symptom which is the doctors are trained to treat with a drug, and I understand that. And this is where I think we need the remedies, which I'm hoping will happen after the Ombudsman section, which I'm just about to embark upon, and that will hopefully be, included in the next interview.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Penny, for coming on to the first episode. So the next episode will probably come out next week. Keep your eye out on that. Thank you, listener, for coming on to this interview. Check out our Your Questions Answered section where we answer your questions. And also check out our ebooks. And you can also get one-on-one counseling and consulting with me over the phone, via Skype or via email. You can check that out on the section one-on-one counseling and consulting. Thanks again, Penny, for coming on to the first part of this interview, and we'll talk next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Patrick.
Bye-bye.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.